My son said, "You're too ugly, Mom," afraid I might embarrass him. And in that moment, I realized my happiness was no longer part of his life. So I left without saying a word, to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Where are you watching this from? What time is it there? Are you sitting quietly, or is the world noisy around you? Some lessons are learned in silence. Some truths hit harder than any punishment. What happens when the person who gave you everything disappears from your life entirely? It's a story of love, betrayal, and the day a mother finally decided she was worth more than anyone's approval, especially her own son's. There is a peculiar kind of pain that feels like drowning and burning at the same time. It happens in quiet places, where no one is watching, where no one is meant to look at you. A forgotten corner. A shadowed pew. A seat that was never meant for a mother. That was where I sat. I felt the choir's voices vibrating through the wooden bench, the hymns swelling high above me, and yet I had never felt more silent in my entire life. No one turned to look at me. No one whispered my name. No one even wondered why the mother of the groom was alone in the last row. Because they didn't see me at all. I watched my son, the boy who once clung to my hand in grocery stores, who used to rest his head on my shoulder when the world felt too big for him, stand tall at the altar with the woman he'd chosen to build a life with. He looked radiant. He looked complete. He looked like he belonged in a world that had no space carved out for me. There are moments in life when you realize a chapter is not ending. It is being torn out quietly while you're still reading it. That day, in that back row, I felt the tear. And I let it happen. Because for the first time in 34 years, I understood something heartbreaking and liberating. My son's happiness no longer included me. But my future no longer needed him. And that was the beginning. The church was breathtaking. The kind of place where stained glass caught the light like broken jewels and poured colors onto the marble floors. People called it beautiful, holy, timeless. But all I felt when I stepped inside was the cold. A polite cold, the kind that slips over your skin without permission, reminding you where you belong. Or where you don't. I slid into the last row quietly, feeling the air shift but no heads turn. Good. If they didn't see me, they couldn't pity me. And I had grown tired of living like someone's quiet, pitiful secret. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the skirt of my dress. Chosen carefully, modest but neat, the kind of thing a mother might wear to her only child's wedding if she wasn't expected to be invisible. I wasn't invited here. I knew that. Michael hadn't said the words directly. He never needed to. His silence, and Rebecca's expression when she learned I existed, had been enough. Her tight smile, her uncomfortable glances, her soft suggestions that maybe a small ceremony is better. More intimate, fewer distractions, told me everything. And Michael. He didn't fight for me. He didn't even pretend to want me there. He simply let me fade out of the frame, the way people dim the lights to make a picture look softer. Still, I came. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe it was something more tender, more tragic, a mother's instinct to witness the final moment before losing her son completely. The orchestra shifted, and the wedding march began. Everyone stood. A sea of expensive fabrics rustled, and I rose with them, feeling like a ghost lifting from a grave. Rebecca appeared at the entrance, glowing in a way that made everyone around me sigh with admiration. She was beautiful, yes. But it wasn't her beauty that struck me. It was her certainty. She walked down the aisle as though the world owed her this perfection. The flowers, the candles, the grandeur, all arranged for her. And then my eyes drifted to Michael. My son. My only. He stood up straighter as she approached. His smile widened, warm and bright, untouched by doubt. The kind of smile that once belonged only to me. There was no hesitation in him. No searching the crowd for my face. No flicker of longing for the woman who had raised him on hope and fear and nights spent praying he would have a life better than mine. Instead, he looked at Rebecca and at the future she represented, the future I never fit into. And I realized something that hollowed me out from the inside. In his eyes, I had already been replaced. The ceremony unfolded like a dream I wasn't part of. Vows spoken with trembling joy. Rings exchanged. Hands clasped tightly. Michael's voice cracked slightly when he said, "I do." Not from nerves, no, but from happiness so full it spilled over. And somewhere deep inside, something in me loosened, then broke. His happiness didn't wound me. Not exactly. But the knowledge that he could feel this way without me, that I had raised a son who believed he could build his perfect world by erasing me from it, that cut deeper than any blade. When the priest finally announced them husband and wife, applause filled the church, echoing against the vaulted ceiling like thunder. I clapped too. Quietly. Softly. The way you clap when you're applauding the end of your own story. The recessional began. Music swelled. People stood again. Michael and Rebecca walked down the aisle together, triumphant, radiant, untouched by shadows. And then, as if pulled by some instinct older than logic, Michael's gaze swept the rows, scanning faces, collecting admiration. Then it stopped. On me. Just for a moment. A heartbeat. A flicker. Shock. Confusion. Embarrassment. Sharp as the snap of a bone. He had not expected me to come. He had certainly not expected me to sit in the last row. I saw the questions forming in his eyes. Why are you here? Why didn't you ask to sit with family? What will people think? But the moment didn't last. Rebecca tugged his hand. The photographer called out. The crowd surged forward. And my son turned away from me once more, easily, naturally, like someone brushing off a memory they no longer needed. I sank back onto the empty pew and felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not grief. Not anger. Clarity. The kind that arrives when you finally stop begging to be seen. Most of the guests had already passed through by the time I approached. I waited deliberately, letting the room empty itself of laughter and perfume and well-meaning congratulations. Rebecca glowed under the chandeliers, her dress pristine, her smile choreographed. She accepted every compliment like someone raised to believe adoration was her inheritance. Michael stood beside her, hand on her waist, bending slightly as people hugged him, clapped him on the back, praised him. He was every bit the polished, presentable man I had spent decades preparing him to become. The irony was almost cruel. When their eyes found me, I saw it again, the silent dialogue between them. Rebecca's smile tightened like a ribbon pulled too hard. Michael's shoulders straightened, bracing himself, as though my presence required emotional armor. "Mom," Michael said when I reached them. "You came." "I did," I whispered. "You're my son." Rebecca extended her hand. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you so much for being here. Truly." Her tone was flawless. Her eyes were guarded. "You look lovely." The lie was elegant, painless, expected. "Thank you," I said softly. "You make a stunning bride." Michael exhaled, relief or obligation, I couldn't tell. "We're both very lucky," he said, and beneath his voice I heard the message. Lucky to have each other. Lucky to have a clean slate. Lucky that the past, and his mother, no longer interfered. I reached into my purse and pulled out the tiny wrapped gift, a silver frame, unremarkable except for its purpose. Rebecca accepted it with a perfect smile. "Thank you. That's so thoughtful." What she didn't notice was my fingers brushing my son's jacket collar. What he didn't feel was the envelope sliding easily into his pocket as I hugged him. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. And for a single trembling instant, his voice softened in return. "Thanks, Mom." Then the moment ended, and I became a background figure once more. I moved through the crowd like smoke, there, but unnoticed. People stopped me to say I looked well, to comment on the ceremony, to quietly wonder why I wasn't seated with family. I gave polite answers, soft, practiced smiles. I had spent my life being small. One more day wouldn't kill me. As I stepped outside, cool air brushed against my skin. My taxi was already waiting, The same one that would take me home to the quiet house where I had rewritten the letter inside Michael's pocket a dozen times. The letter that told the story he never cared to ask about. The money he never imagined existed. The mother he never truly knew. By Tuesday, everything would change. For him. And for me. He would see the cost of treating me like an afterthought. He would read the truth of the life he'd never bothered to understand. And he would learn that the woman he had deemed too ugly to be seen had been building something powerful, quietly, alone. By Tuesday, Michael Patterson would lose his mother. And I would finally find myself. Michael's wedding night was not supposed to be mine to witness, yet there I was, walking into the quiet of my house as if returning from a battlefield rather than a church. The thin lights scattered across my living room felt unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else's life. Maybe they did. Maybe they belonged to the woman I had been before I slipped that envelope into my son's jacket, before I set in motion the kind of truth that could rip open the seams of an entire future. I didn't turn on my phone. Not the home line. Not the cell. Both remained buried in the quiet, dark pocket of my purse. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat in my armchair, the same place where I had listened to my son tell me I was too embarrassing to attend his wedding, and I let the silence settle over me. Not like punishment or loneliness, but like a gentle blanket. For the first time in decades, silence felt like mine. Nothing needed from me. No one expecting anything. No demands. No guilt. No contortion of myself to fit inside someone else's comfort. Just breath. Just stillness. Just the soft awareness that my life was already shifting beneath my feet. I slept early that night, wrapped in a calm that felt suspiciously close to relief. It was a quiet, private kind of peace, the kind that comes when a decision has finally found a spine inside you. By morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains like forgiveness I didn't need. I made breakfast slowly, as if savoring the ordinary routines I rarely paused to notice. My heartbeat felt steady, patient, unhurried. I didn't touch my phone all morning. By the time the clock turned to 8:30 a.m., the world outside my window looked deceptively peaceful. Birds hopping across branches, cars pulling into driveways, neighbors tending to Sunday smallness. Then the doorbell didn't ring. I didn't get a knock. Nothing dramatic. But my landline phone buzzed, a sound that felt almost alien after a night of perfect quiet. Helen. Her voice hit the air before I could even say hello. Dorothy, turn on your damn phone. All of them. Check everything. I could hear the thrill, the panic, the tremble in her voice. Not fear, no, excitement. A kind of breathless urgency that belonged only to someone who already knew the storm had arrived. I was enjoying my peace, I murmured. Enjoy it later. Michael must have blown up your phone all night. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I walked to my purse, pulled out my cell phone, and pressed the power button. The screen lit up like a warning flare in the dark. 17 missed calls. 12 voicemails. Texts overflowing. Helen was still speaking. Play them. I want to hear the tone. So I did. The first message hit my ears like a cautious tap on the shoulder. Mom, I found your envelope. Very funny. Call me so we can talk like adults. His voice was calm. Irritated. Slightly amused. The sound of a man who believed he understood the world he lived in. By voicemail 3, the veneer began to crack. I called James Franklin's emergency line. He won't tell me anything until Monday, but he confirmed you're his client. Mom, what is going on? By message 7, confusion had mutated into disbelief. $2.6 million? Where did this come from? Why have you been lying to me about everything? Everything. As though my entire life existed only in relation to him. As though money were the heart of betrayal. Not the years of emotional absence, the condescension, the way he tried to store me away like a misplaced piece of furniture. I felt nothing listening to his anger. No guilt. No shame. Only a quiet ache for how small his world truly was. When message 12 played, I almost laughed. Rebecca's father knows. Someone saw your letter, and now her whole family thinks you came to the wedding to embarrass us. Rebecca locked herself in the bathroom. What have you done? What had I done? I had told the truth. And like all truths, it had teeth. By voicemail 17, his voice was fraying. I'm coming over. We're going to fix this. You can't just destroy everything because you're angry about the wedding. Mom, you're acting insane. I ended the playback with the same serenity with which I'd started it. I wasn't insane. Not even close. This was the clearest I had been in years. Helen arrived minutes later, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her coat thrown over pajamas, carrying pastries as if we were simply preparing for a Sunday brunch. She placed the box on my table and sat across from me, leaning forward with both palms flat. Well, she said, what now? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Michael. His shadow moved behind the frosted glass like a ghost trying to find a way back into a home he'd voluntarily abandoned. I opened the door slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept. Tuxedo pants. Half-buttoned shirt. Bow tie undone and hanging like a broken limb. His hair messy. Eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man who'd been dragged through the consequences he used to believe only happened to other people. He brushed past me, pacing the living room like a trapped animal. Mom, he said, voice hoarse. What have you done? The familiarity of the question felt strange. How many times had he asked me that in childhood? What have you done, Mom? What did you forget, Mom? Why didn't you think, Mom? But now the tone was different. Raw. Fearful. How was your wedding night? I asked. He stared at me as if he didn't recognize the voice, the calm, the stillness. My wedding night? My wedding night was spent explaining to Rebecca's family why my mother decided to sabotage us. They think you came to humiliate us. Rebecca won't speak to me. Her father is talking about annulment. Everything is falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised by how much the words didn't hurt coming out. You're sorry, he snapped. You planned this. You orchestrated this disaster. Helen stepped into the room then, her presence small but unwavering. Maybe, she said quietly, your mother did what she had to do because her son told her she was too ugly to attend his wedding. Michael turned on her. This is between me and my mother. No, Helen said. This is between a woman who spent her life sacrificing everything and the child who threw her away when she no longer fit his aesthetic. Michael opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. I watched realization settle over him like dust after an explosion. I saw something else too, fear. Not of losing his mother. No. Fear of losing the version of me he had designed in his mind. The quiet, manageable, grateful version. The version who didn't push back. The version who accepted being hidden. Mom, he said softer now, I know I handled things wrong. I know the wedding. I know I should have made space for you. I just wanted everything to go smoothly. Rebecca's family is very particular. And I wasn't convenient, I murmured. That's not what I meant. But it was. It always had been. You showed me who I was to you, Michael, I said. Not hatred. Not cruelty. Something quieter. Something worse. What do you want me to do? He demanded. Tell me how to fix this. And for the first time in years, I looked at my son. Not the child I raised, not the man I hoped he'd become, but the person standing in front of me. And I knew. You can't fix this. He inhaled sharply, as if the words themselves had pierced him. Mom, please. I love you. Love isn't words, I whispered. It's how you show up. It's how you make room. It's how you choose someone even when it's inconvenient. He blinked rapidly. I could see the beginning of tears forming. Let me try again, he whispered. But the truth settled between us like a closed door. I don't have years left for you to figure out how to love me. Helen touched my shoulder gently, grounding me. "It's time," she whispered. And it was. For me. For him. For the ghost of the woman I had been. I told him about Switzerland. About leaving. About the new accounts. The house sale. The clean break. He stared at me like a child watching his mother step onto a train that would never return. "You're leaving me," he said, voice cracking. "You left me first," I replied. "You just expected me to wait in the dark until you needed something." He sank onto my couch, shoulders shaking as tears spilled freely. Tears I had waited decades to see. Tears that were too late. Tears that belonged to the little boy he used to be. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please don't go." But sorry is a word meant for the moments before you break someone, not after. I turned away, the heaviness in my chest not from guilt, but from the quiet, aching knowledge that I had finally chosen myself. Helen and I left the house together. Behind me, I didn't close the door gently. I let it click into place with the finality of an ending long overdue. Outside, the air felt too clean for the kind of heaviness sitting inside my chest. A strange, translucent morning, the sort that pretends everything is new, even when everything is broken. Helen walked beside me without speaking, as though she knew any sound louder than breath might shatter the thin calm I was holding on to. Behind us, my son remained in the doorway, though I didn't turn to look. I didn't have to. I could feel his presence like a trembling thread stretching between two worlds, one he had chosen, and one he had discarded so easily that it stunned him to realize it wasn't waiting in the dark anymore. Helen finally exhaled. "You okay?" The question wasn't casual. It was weighted, cautious, but necessary, like someone checking a wound to make sure it wasn't still bleeding. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe I'm more okay than I've ever been. Maybe I'm terrified. Maybe both." That sounds about right. Her quiet certainty felt like a hand around mine. Not pulling, not pushing, just holding. We walked to the end of the street, where my car was parked. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out the keys, not from fear, but from the realization that something irreversible had happened, and I wasn't drowning in it the way I once would have. "I didn't think he'd cry," I whispered. Helen leaned on the passenger door. "He didn't think you'd ever walk away." I blinked at that. Slowly, almost painfully. "Do you think I was cruel?" "No," she said. "I think you were finally honest." Honesty. A word so simple, yet it had taken me a lifetime to grow into it. Maybe motherhood had taught me too well how to shrink myself. How to swallow hurt. How to be quiet in rooms where I should have screamed. But today, the screaming had happened without volume. I unlocked the door, but before I could get in, Helen placed her hand on my arm. "Dorothy, where are you going?" Such a simple question, yet it pierced me straight through. Where was I going? The house behind me wasn't home anymore. The future ahead wasn't built yet. I was standing in the space between identities, between lives, unrooted, drifting, but strangely free. "I don't know," I said. "I haven't known in a very long time." "Then let's go somewhere you can breathe." I nodded, and we drove. The road unrolled before us like something waking from sleep. Quiet houses, pale skies, trees stretching their bare branches like desperate hands. The world looked fragile. Or maybe it was me seeing clearly for the first time. We ended up at a lake on the other edge of town. The kind of place people forgot existed once adulthood swallowed them whole. The water was still mirror-like, reflecting a sky that hadn't yet decided if it wanted to be blue. I sat at a wooden bench, and the cold pressed gently against my skin. Helen sat close, not touching, but present. "You don't have to be strong right now," she murmured. "Not with me." The words cracked something inside me. Not pain, not sadness, but a release. A letting go. I had spent so long holding myself together for the sake of a child who only saw the strength and never the cost. I didn't cry, but I breathed in a way that felt like I was finally exhaling 20 years of silence. "Do you think he hates me?" I asked after a long while. "No. He fears losing control. That's different. Helen was right. Michael had never known me as a whole person, only as someone who existed to steady the world around him. A quiet orbit, predictable and unmoving. But now he had seen the gravity shift. And it scared him. I stared at the lake, letting my thoughts drift across its surface. I'm not going back, I whispered. You shouldn't. I'm not changing my mind. You've already changed your life. The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my face. It felt like a touch, gentle, familiar, comforting in a way that had nothing to do with people. For once, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt open. We stayed at the lake until the cold chased us back into the car. The silence between us was soft, not suffocating, not heavy, just full. When we returned to my house, Michael was gone. The curtains in the living room swayed faintly from where the window had been opened earlier, as if the space itself had exhaled. My envelope lay on the coffee table. He had taken the letter out. Only the empty folded paper remained. The absence hit harder than any confrontation could have. He had read it. All of it. My life. My sacrifices. The money I had saved in silence. The truths he never cared to ask about. The parts of me that had been invisible even when I stood right in front of him. Helen placed her hand on my back. You ready? She asked. I looked around the house. The framed pictures. The dull curtains. The chipped kitchen table. The echoes of a life lived almost entirely in service to a child who now had his own orbit. I'm ready, I said. We packed only what mattered. Some clothes. Important documents. A few photographs, not of Michael, but of myself. Younger. Brighter. Before life taught me how to disappear. By evening, the house was stripped of anything personal. It felt like walking through someone else's memory. Someone else's unhappiness. My train ticket sat inside my coat pocket, the first physical proof of the future I had chosen. Helen hugged me tightly, her arms wrapping around me like a safety net I never knew I had. You're not running away, she murmured. You're stepping into your own story. I nodded, my throat tightening. I just hope it's not too late. It's never too late to begin. I believed her. For the first time in years, I genuinely believed her. Night settled over the street, turning everything into shadows. I pulled my suitcase behind me as we walked to the curb, the wheels clicking softly against the pavement like a heartbeat calming itself. Before getting into the taxi, I looked back at the house one last time. Not with grief. Not with longing. With gratitude. With closure. It had been a cage. But it had also been the place where I survived long enough to learn how to escape. The driver opened the door for me. I climbed inside. Helen stood outside, her hands tucked into her sleeves, watching me with a small, brave smile. You'll be okay, she mouthed. And I would. Not instantly. Not magically. But steadily, softly, honestly. As the taxi pulled away, I didn't cry. I didn't look back again. The night opened in front of me like a promise. And for the first time in my life, I stepped toward a future that belonged entirely to me. The train lurched forward with a low, shuddering growl, a sound that felt like something ancient waking up inside my chest. The station lights blurred into streaks, then into shadows, then into nothing at all. The world outside the window dissolved into motion, into distance, into the silent unraveling of a life I had clung to for far too long. I watched the tracks slip away beneath me, thin, parallel lines cutting through the night like the edges of a decision I could never take back. My suitcase sat beside me, small and insufficient to hold the weight of 68 years. And yet somehow it contained everything I needed for the life ahead. For the first few minutes, I waited for the familiar ache of regret, the instinctive desire to turn back. It didn't come. What came instead was a slow, deep exhale that felt like the first real breath I had taken in decades. Across the aisle, a young woman held a sleeping baby against her chest. The child's tiny fingers curled around the fabric of her coat, and she stroked his hair with a soft, automatic tenderness. Once I had done that too. Once, I had thought it was the beginning of something wonderful instead of the beginning of my erasure. The baby stirred, whimpering, and the young mother hummed something sad and sweet. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me like a lullaby for a grief I wasn't ready to name. "You look tired," a voice said gently. I opened my eyes to see the conductor standing beside my seat, an older man with kind eyes and the posture of someone used to being ignored. "I am tired," I admitted. "Long trip." "No. Long life." He chuckled softly, not mockingly, but in that way people do when they recognize a truth they've learned the hard way. "If you need anything, ring the bell," he said. "I will." When he walked away, I returned my gaze to the window. The night was full now, deep and thick and endless. The lights of the small towns we passed flickered briefly and then disappeared into the dark like memories choosing whether to follow or fade. My phone buzzed inside my coat pocket. I didn't need to look. I knew exactly who it was. For a long moment, I let it ring. Let it vibrate. Let it try to pull me back to a life I no longer intended to inhabit. It buzzed again, then again, until the phone felt warm against my chest, like a heartbeat trying to sync with mine. Finally, I took it out. 9 missed calls. Michael. 3 new voicemails. I didn't listen. I didn't delete them either. I simply turned the phone off and placed it in the outer pocket of my suitcase, where it felt far away and harmless. Without the phone's buzzing, the silence inside the train became painfully loud. Too loud. Like every thought I'd ever chosen to swallow had suddenly found a voice. I leaned my head against the cold glass and let the darkness stare back at me. Helen had promised she'd meet me at the airport in the morning. She'd booked the tickets herself, insisting that I not trust myself to make travel plans while emotionally raw. "You'll second-guess everything," she'd said. "Let me take that part." And she was right. I would have hesitated. I would have found excuses. I would have convinced myself that tomorrow wasn't the right day to leave, and then neither was the next. But now the wheels were in motion, literal wheels carrying me toward the life I should have given myself decades ago. The train rocked gently, rhythmically, like a cradle. Eventually, exhaustion pulled my eyes closed. When I woke, dawn was bleeding into the sky, pale, hesitant, as though unsure if it wanted to commit to morning. The air felt different. Lighter. A little colder. Like opening a window in a room that had been shut for too long. The train slowed, brakes hissing, and the intercom crackled. Next stop, airport terminal. My heart tightened. Not painfully, but deeply, like something being stitched together after years of slow tearing. I stepped off the train with my suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels clicking in an uneven rhythm that sounded like nerves trying to steady themselves. The platform was quiet, the world suspended in that strange hour between night and morning when everything feels possible and terrifying at once. In the waiting area, Helen stood with 2 coffees and a smile that didn't need to stretch wide to be sincere. "There you are," she said. "Here I am," I echoed. She handed me the coffee. It was too hot, too sweet. Exactly the way I liked it. I hadn't told her that. She had simply known. "You ready?" she asked. "Ask me again in 20 years. She laughed. "If we're alive in 20 years, remind me to celebrate." "We'll be alive." My voice was steady, surprising even to myself. "We didn't come this far to die early." Helen linked her arm with mine. "Then let's go live, Dorothy." We moved through the automatic doors together, 2 older women with more luggage in our hearts than in our hands, but walking with a determination that felt new and shaky and extraordinary. Inside the terminal, a familiar feeling crept over me, the sensation of being invisible, overlooked, unimportant. People rushed past with the urgent purpose of those who still believed time belonged to them. I had felt small in spaces like this for most of my life. Today, I didn't. Today, invisibility felt like freedom. We checked in, passed through security, and sat at our gate with time to spare. I looked around at the other passengers, Families, business travelers, honeymooners, students. So many beginnings. So many endings. And somewhere in that vast crowd, I felt something shift inside me. Not regret. Not fear. Recognition. Belonging. Possibility. My flight was boarding when my phone buzzed again. Just once, a single vibration. I had forgotten to turn it off airplane mode when I powered it back on for check-in. A new voicemail. Michael. I should have ignored it. I knew that. But old habits are stubborn creatures. With a breath I didn't want to take, I pressed play. His voice came through weak, cracked at the edges. Mom, please. I know you're upset. I know I hurt you. But please don't leave like this. Please don't disappear. I can fix it. I swear, I'll fix everything. Just tell me where you are. Please. I don't know what to do without you. A part of me, the part that had lived for him, survived for him, breathed for him, ached so sharply I had to steady myself on the armrest. But then I heard the last 3 seconds of the message. A breath. A whisper. A truth he didn't mean to say out loud. Rebecca thinks I made you do this. She thinks I drove you away. Maybe she's right. I closed my phone slowly, like it was something fragile enough to break between my fingers. Helen touched my knee gently. You don't owe him going backward. I know, I whispered. But I think he finally understands. That doesn't mean you have to suffer for his lesson. No, I said. It means I don't have to suffer anymore for mine. They called our group. Helen stood, pulling her scarf around her neck. Dorothy. It's time. Time. Such a simple word. Such a heavy thing. Time to board. Time to leave. Time to live. We walked to the gate together. I didn't look back. Not once. On the plane, I sat by the window. The seat felt narrow, the air stale, but something inside me was expanding. Quietly, steadily, a softness unfolding like wings. When the engines roared to life and the ground began to fall away beneath us, I felt a pressure behind my ribs I hadn't expected. Not sorrow. Not relief. Rebirth. The clouds swallowed the world below, turning it into a white, weightless landscape where nothing existed except possibility. For the first time in 68 years, I wasn't someone's mother. I wasn't someone's burden. I wasn't someone's disappointment or shadow or afterthought. I was simply myself. Dorothy. A woman in motion. A woman becoming. As the sunlight broke through the clouds and the plane climbed higher into the bright, endless sky, I let my eyes close and allowed myself to feel weightless. Not lost. Not running. Becoming. The woman I could have been. The woman I should have been. The woman I still had time to be. And somewhere far below, in a house that no longer held me, my son was discovering the first quiet hours of a world in which his mother finally chose herself. He would learn. He would ache. He would break in places he once thought permanent. But that was his journey. This one was mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. The first thing I noticed about Switzerland was the air. It was unervingly clean. So clean it almost hurt to breathe, as though my lungs had grown accustomed to the weight of exhaustion and didn't know how to accept purity without flinching. The sky stretched like a pale blue sheet pulled taut across the mountains, and the lake shimmered beneath it with a stillness that felt ceremonial. I stood at the railing outside the airport, my suitcase beside me, watching the thin mist rise from Lake Geneva as if the water itself was exhaling slowly after a lifetime of being held too tightly. Helen touched my arm gently. Welcome home, she whispered. Home. The word trembled inside me, unsure where to settle. We took a taxi to Montreux, winding through roads carved between the lake and the mountains, the scenery so impossibly beautiful it felt unreal, like a painting someone had made too perfect to be trusted. I pressed my fingertips against the window, grounding myself in the cold glass, assuring myself this wasn't a dream, wasn't a fantasy I would wake from only to find myself back in the small, suffocating house I had abandoned. As the taxi climbed a gentle slope, clusters of white and cream houses appeared, nestled among vineyards and stone paths. Their roofs gleamed like polished clay in the morning sun. Helen smiled. "You'll like our apartment. It's small, but the view will make you cry." "I've cried enough," I murmured. "Not this kind of crying." We arrived at a building perched on a quiet hill, its balconies draped with cascading flowers and its windows reflecting the lake like a second sky. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender and warm wood. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor. Helen opened the door and stepped aside so I could enter first. I did. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Alps in the distance, so sharply outlined against the blue sky that they looked unreal. The lake stretched below, impossibly wide and impossibly calm, its colors shifting between silver and pale turquoise with the softness of a sigh. Light flooded every corner of the room. Not harsh light. Gentle, forgiving, tender light. A kind of light I had never lived in before. Helen watched my face quietly. "Well, my voice cracked unexpectedly. "It's beautiful. It's freedom," she corrected softly. Freedom. Another fragile word I had never allowed myself to hold. I walked to the window and placed my palm against it. The glass was cool, but the sun warmed my skin through it. For the first time in so long I couldn't remember, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a burden. I felt alive. We spent the day unpacking, moving slowly, speaking only when necessary. It wasn't silence between us. It was comfort, ease. The kind of companionship that doesn't demand, doesn't suffocate, doesn't take without giving back. That night, we sat on the terrace with 2 glasses of wine and a plate of fruit from the market downstairs. The sky turned shades of pink and lavender, and the sun melted behind the mountains like a candle burning itself out gracefully. Helen raised her glass. "To your new life." I raised mine. "To the death of the old one." Our glasses clicked softly, a sound so delicate it could have broken if either of us had breathed too hard. And then, as the last light of the day slipped away, my phone vibrated again. I had forgotten to silence it. The screen lit my lap with a sharp glow. "Michael." Helen froze. I froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, I turned the phone face down. "I'm not answering," I whispered. "You don't have to. But I want to know why he's calling." "You already know." I did. A mother always knows. But curiosity is a stubborn, dangerous thing. And grief, even when it is righteous, has a way of reaching for the person who inflicted it. When the call ended, the phone vibrated again. Then again. Then a voicemail notification appeared. My hand hovered over the screen. I didn't want to listen. I also couldn't stop myself. With a deep breath, I pressed play. His voice came through hoarse, exhausted, frayed at the edges. "Mom, I don't know where you are. Rebecca left last night. She said she can't be married to someone who lies about family. She said your letter made her realize I'm the kind of man who hides people when they don't fit the picture. And she's not wrong." I closed my eyes. I tried calling her this morning, but she won't answer. Her parents won't speak to me either. I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart. Please, if you hear this, call me. Even if you never want to see me again, please just let me know you're safe. His breathing shook. A long pause. Then, "I think I finally understand how alone you must have felt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The message ended. Helen reached over and squeezed my hand, grounding me in the present. "Dorothy," she said softly, "you're allowed to feel everything. But you're not allowed to punish yourself for choosing peace." My throat tightened. I never wanted him to be unhappy. No mother does. But he made choices too. And you're finally letting him live with them. I put the phone away. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, unbroken, untouched, indifferent to the storms unfolding inside human hearts. Watching it, I understood something clearly for the first time. Sometimes love isn't staying. Sometimes love is leaving before you disappear completely. Days passed in a strange, almost dreamlike rhythm. I woke to sunlight instead of dread. I walked along the lakefront with Helen, learning the curve of every path, the language of every breeze. I cooked meals not because someone expected them, but because I wanted to taste something warm. I slept without fear of a phone ringing with demands or guilt. And slowly, piece by piece, I started becoming someone I didn't recognize, but someone I wanted to be. Yet even in peace, grief finds its corners to settle in. Some evenings I found myself staring at the water, wondering if Michael had eaten that day, if he still cried, if he still slept on his couch because the bed smelled like a life he no longer had. Other nights, I found myself not thinking of him at all. Those nights scared me more. The first letter from James Franklin arrived 2 weeks later. Legal documents confirming the final transfer of funds. Affidavits about my will. A neatly typed explanation of how my death had been processed in the US. At the bottom, in James's careful handwriting, he asked about you. Every day for a week. He is grieving you. Not your money. You. Be at peace. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer. Later, Helen found me staring at the mountains, quiet and shaken. You okay? She asked. I think he's finally feeling the thing I felt for years, I whispered. The kind of loneliness that eats your name. Pain teaches, she said gently. It can unmake a person, or remake them. Do you think he'll change? I think he'll want to. I think he'll try. That doesn't mean you owe him the chance to practice on you. I breathed in slowly, letting the alpine air fill my lungs. I'm not going back. Good. A month passed. Then another. I sent postcards, to no one. Bought books I never had time to read before. Learned how to mix colors on a canvas until they resembled sunsets and bruises and rebirth. I painted the mountains. I painted the lake. I painted a woman standing in the middle of a storm with her hands open, waiting to feel the rain. One day, Helen stood behind me as I painted. That's you, she murmured. No, I said. That's who I'm becoming. She kissed the top of my head. You already are. And somewhere thousands of miles away, in a town that once defined me, in a house that once imprisoned me, my son was learning how to live in the absence of the woman he believed would always wait, always forgive, always stay. He left one final voicemail. I listened to it at dawn, the sky pink and trembling with possibility. His voice was steady, not desperate, just broken in a new, deeper way. I hope you're alive, he whispered. And I hope you're happy, wherever you went. I want you to know I'm trying to be better. Not to bring you back. Just because. I finally understand what it means to love someone in a way that doesn't take everything from them. If you're out there, thank you for everything you gave me. I'm sorry for everything I took. I deleted the message. Not because it hurt, but because I didn't need it anymore. The past had spoken. And I had finally stopped listening. The lake glittered in the sunlight, soft and endless. Montreux had become something I never thought I'd find. A place where silence didn't feel like abandonment. A place where mornings felt like beginnings instead of burdens. A place where I existed fully, not as someone's mother, but as myself. And in that quiet, unfamiliar beauty, I felt myself unfold. Not into the woman I had been. Not into the mother I had tried to be, but into something freer, softer, and infinitely more alive. The old Dorothy had died. The new one was just beginning. The first snow arrived unexpectedly. Not the kind that covers everything in a cheerful blanket, but thin, scattered flakes that dissolved on the pavement before they could settle. Switzerland's winter was already sharp, biting at the edges of the days. And yet, inside, the apartment remained warm and still, a bubble of fragile peace. I sat by the window, the brush in my hand half painted, half forgotten. The canvas stared back at me like a patient witness. Helen brewed tea in the corner, the aroma of chamomile and cinnamon filling the space. And yet the tranquility felt brittle, almost temporary. Michael's voice echoed in my mind. Not the voicemail, not the letters, but the memory of the panic, the uncontainable desperation I had heard in him years ago. That voice was not gone. It had been buried under my own fear and grief, but somewhere it lived. And one evening, it found me again. The phone vibrated on the wooden table. "Michael," I muttered, hesitating. My fingers hovered over the screen. Helen, behind me, glanced quietly, saying nothing. The line connected. His voice was low, fractured, almost unrecognizable. "Mom, I can't. I messed up. Everything." And then silence. A long, ragged inhale that spoke more than words could. I swallowed hard, trying to find the mother I had been, the one who would rush into every disaster. But that woman no longer existed. I just don't know how to fix anything," he finally said, his voice cracking with exhaustion and guilt. "I've lost her. I lost Rebecca. I've lost everything I tried to hold together. And now, I can't even reach you." I closed my eyes. I wanted to cry. I wanted to shout. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay. But truth was a stranger now. It hovered around us like the cold snow outside the window. Sharp, untouchable, undeniable. "You're alive," I whispered finally. "And I'm surviving. That's all you can do too." He made a noise, half cry, half laugh, and then began talking. Talking in a rush of confessions and admissions. Every secret, every lie he had buried, every fear he had ignored, it poured out of him in trembling syllables. I listened. I didn't speak. I let him unravel. And for the first time, I realized something fundamental. Michael wasn't just a boy I had raised. He was a man trapped inside his own mistakes, a man learning grief and accountability in the rawest, cruelest way. I hung up eventually, my hand trembling. The snow outside had begun to stick, frosting the mountains like sugar on cake. I felt hollow, but lighter. "Did you answer him?" Helen asked, voice soft. "I listened," I said. "But I didn't fix him." "That's not your job," she reminded me gently. "It's never been your job." That night, sleep was fragile. I dreamt of the house in the States, of locked doors and silent hallways. I dreamt of Rebecca's face, disappointed and distant. And I dreamt of Michael, older, with his head in his hands, crying alone. I woke at dawn with tears staining my cheeks, but also with a strange clarity. Pain is not linear. Love is not linear. And sometimes the only way to heal is to step back, let the chaos exist, and wait for it to make sense on its own. Weeks passed. Michael's calls became less frantic, more reflective. He began to speak not as a boy desperate for my presence, but as a man beginning to confront his failures. Each message he left was smaller, quieter, more controlled, but beneath it, the tremor of guilt and loss persisted. I could hear him learning to breathe again, slowly, painfully. Meanwhile, I was changing. My apartment became a studio. I painted obsessively, each brushstroke a tether to reality, a way of speaking words I could no longer say aloud. My evenings were filled with the murmur of the lake below, the distant bells of the town, and the soft laughter of Helen when she caught me talking to the canvas as if it could answer back. I met the townspeople quietly, their smiles polite, their curiosity tempered. They didn't know me. They didn't need to. For once, I could exist without explanation, without apology, without the weight of history pressing down on my spine. But even in peace, shadows linger. One night, a letter arrived, handwritten, familiar. I recognized Michael's careful script immediately. "Mom," it began. The letter was a confession. He admitted every truth he had hidden, every selfish choice, every anger he had bottled inside himself. He wrote of the loneliness, the fear of never being good enough, of losing Rebecca and realizing he had finally lost the safety net I had once provided. He ended it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I understand now. And I'm trying. Every day. Maybe one day you can see it. Maybe not. Either way, I hope you're happy. I put the letter down. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. Helen sat beside me, sensing the moment. He's changing, she said softly. I think he's learning, I whispered. But he's still breaking. Growth often is, Helen reminded me. Outside, snow fell heavier now, blanketing the world in white silence. And I realized that the world I had left behind, chaotic, loud, full of guilt and grief, was shrinking further away. My life in Montreux was expanding, breathing, unfolding like the first pages of a story I didn't know how to write, but wanted desperately to. I began to see it clearly. Michael's journey would not depend on me anymore. My transformation was complete. I had survived what once would have destroyed me. I had faced my grief, my guilt, my fear, and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. And yet, somewhere in the soft snowfall, I sensed the approaching storm, the final confrontation. I didn't fear it. I only waited. For now, I existed in the in-between, the quiet, dark, fragile beauty of rebirth, the calm before the full reckoning. The morning light in Montreux spilled softly over the lake, turning the surface into a mirror of pink and gold. I watched it from my terrace, Helen beside me, her hand warm around mine. The air carried a crisp promise, yet beneath that tranquility, a storm waited, the storm of reckoning that would finally close the chapter one had been quietly writing for decades. I knew Michael would arrive. Not physically yet, but in my mind, he was already here, pacing, rehearsing every word, every apology he could muster. I could hear it in the rhythm of my heartbeat, a faint echo of the panic he must be feeling, the realization that the life he had taken for granted was forever changed. I sipped my coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. Each swallow was deliberate, a tether grounding me to the reality I had chosen. The reality where I was not a ghost haunting someone else's life, not an invisible mother swallowed by expectation, not a servant of his narrative. I was alive, fully alive, and I would face him on my terms. Helen, sensing my tension, finally spoke. He's going to need this, Dorothy. The truth, all of it. And you need him to hear it too. I nodded. I had rehearsed this conversation countless times, in silence, in whispered confessions to the empty walls of my apartment. But rehearsing is nothing like facing the person who believed he had the power to define your existence. The doorbell rang sharply, piercing the quiet morning. My stomach fluttered, not with fear, but with the strange thrill of inevitability. Helen and I exchanged a glance, and I felt the old instincts stir, protector, nurturer, survivor. But this time, they were tempered by clarity, by experience, by the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I would no longer shrink for anyone. I opened the door. Michael stood there, dressed in a simple shirt and slacks, unshaven, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. His hands were trembling slightly, but his posture, though hesitant, spoke of a man who had finally begun to confront his own culpability. "Mom," he said, voice tentative, almost fearful. I need to talk. I've left everything behind. Rebecca, she won't speak to me. I don't blame her. And I need you. I need to hear it from you, everything." I stepped aside, gesturing him in. The apartment, though modest, was filled with light now. Every corner spoke of careful living, of a life rebuilt on one's own terms, and he took it in, his eyes scanning, absorbing, understanding for the first time the weight of what he had assumed. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the lake visible behind him through the large glass doors. Helen quietly placed a tray of tea and pastries between us, retreating to the corner, respecting the intimacy of what was about to unfold. "I suppose," I began, voice steady, "that you want answers, explanations, maybe even forgiveness." Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on mine. "Do you know what it feels like," I continued, "to spend 34 years shaping someone's life with care, with sacrifices, with invisible devotion, and then be treated as though your existence was a mere inconvenience?" He flinched, But he didn't interrupt. I worked double shifts while you slept in warmth. I saved every penny to secure your future, every decision measured to protect you from disappointment, from the cruelties of the world. And you decided who I should be. You thought my presence inconvenient, my desires irrelevant, my worth defined only by how much I served you. His head dipped, eyes glistening. I could see the dawning realization, the stark confrontation with his own blindness. I didn't understand, he whispered, voice raw. I thought I was doing right by you, by us. I didn't know. Don't, I interrupted gently. Don't speak to defend yourself. Listen. I reached into my bag, pulling out a small, worn envelope, one he would recognize from the wedding. His eyes widened slightly, the memory of that day flickering across his features. The money, I said softly, was never for you. It was never meant to sustain your illusions. It was meant for women who needed it, for lives that could be rebuilt, for futures that could flourish without neglect or shame. I left you nothing, not because I was cruel, but because you had already taken everything else for granted. You had taken me. He sat back, shaking slightly. Words failed him. The enormity of his losses pressed against him like the cold winter wind outside, unforgiving and real. You're alive, he finally said, voice barely audible. You're alive. I thought you were dead. Yes, I said, leaning back. Dorothy Patterson died the moment I realized my life was mine to claim. What remains is me. Helen and I are living, thriving, free. And it is beautiful. Painful, but beautiful. He looked at me, a mix of grief, awe, and terror etched into every line of his face. Mom, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to make this right. You can't, I said. Not fully. You can acknowledge it, live with it, learn from it. But you cannot undo the past. And you cannot demand my presence to soothe your guilt. That is not love. That is not repentance. That is selfishness. His head fell into his hands, tears slipping past his fingers. The man I had raised, the boy I had protected, the son I had loved more than life itself. He was finally seeing the truth. Seeing me. Not the mother he imagined, not the servant of his convenience, not the ghost he thought he controlled. Mom, I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking into sobs. I understand now. I see everything. I'm trying. I reached across the table, resting my hand lightly over his. Trying is all you can do. And it may not be enough for me, not now, maybe never. But it can be enough for you, to stop repeating the mistakes, to stop taking for granted the ones who truly love you. He nodded, tears streaming freely. I'll never forget, Mom. Never. I wish I could have seen you sooner, understood sooner. I wish that too, I admitted. But life is seldom kind in its timing. We act with what we know, with what we can. And now, you know. And I hope you will carry that knowledge with care, with humility. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a space filled with recognition, with grief, with the unspoken bond of mother and son finally confronting the impossible truths. Outside, the lake shimmered under the morning sun, as if acknowledging the fragile, painful reconciliation. We spoke for hours after that. Not as mother and son of the past, but as two human beings navigating the wreckage and beauty of existence. I told him stories of my life in Switzerland, the paintings, the travels, the freedom. He listened, rapt and humbled. He asked questions, not demands. He laughed softly at small misadventures, his pride and arrogance softened by the gravity of loss and understanding. And yet, the darkness remained. For him, for me. It was a shadow of what had been, a reminder that some things cannot be fully healed, only acknowledged. I did not apologize for disappearing. I had no reason. I only explained the why, and he accepted it as best as he could. Days turned into weeks. Michael began to rebuild his life, not with entitlement, but with awareness, accountability, and most importantly, respect. The foundation I had created for other women flourished under careful stewardship, and through the stories of those whose lives were changed, he glimpsed the legacy of sacrifice he had so long misunderstood. Helen and I traveled further, exploring the cities, the mountains, the vineyards. Each day was a lesson in living fully, unapologetically, in choosing joy, creativity, and courage over obligation, fear, and past pain. We painted, read, laughed, and cried, reveling in the richness of years reclaimed. One evening, in the quiet light of my Montreux terrace, I felt the culmination of decades of careful calculation, silent endurance, and bold defiance. I was Dorothy Morrison, alive, wealthy in freedom and spirit, a woman reborn from the ashes of her own life, no longer invisible, no longer diminished. And somewhere across the world, Michael paused in his own life, recognizing the cost of entitlement, the weight of loss, and the profound truth of a mother's love, a love that had demanded accountability and given liberation. The story was complete. The pain, the sacrifice, the reckoning, all of it had led here. And for the first time in decades, I felt unburdened, luminous, gloriously free. As the sun set behind the Alps, casting a golden reflection on Lake Geneva, I lifted my glass to the horizon and whispered softly, to myself, to the past, and to the woman I had been. Goodbye, Dorothy Patterson. Hello, Dorothy Morrison. And never, ever turning back. And in the silence that followed, there was only life, raw and beautiful, waiting to be lived fully, unapologetically, and entirely on my own terms.